Hello everyone. After the innovation video, Brent was bugging me quite a bit about being in the next video. Rightfully so this go around you'll hear from the man himself, Dr. Siebel, but this time it'll be on traction. You might be getting a sense of the tactics and strategies involved in bringing something innovative into the world. This is entrepreneurship. It's exciting, it's creative. You may have also noticed it's not all big evaluations and wowing the crowd. It's tiring, it's uncertain.
And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass.
We're making a lot of assumptions and we're working hard to collect evidence by running lean experiments. Experiments designed to minimize the spending of money, time, and energy. The rate at which we burn these resources is called our burn rate. How fast we're burning resources to carry out this process. First, we identify and validate the problem. Second, we identify and validate a possible solution to that problem. Third, we identify and validate a business model to support that solution. I'm sure you see the trend here. It's almost scientific. Once we find a solution that truly addresses a problem, we have problem-solution fit. But the question then becomes, how can we make that solution economical? And once we achieve that, we have something called product-market fit.
One of the first things we need to revisit immediately is this idea of multi-sided market segments. So this is a concept that oftentimes will trip up early stage innovators and entrepreneurs. So the first thing, if we skipped over this or we didn't really think it through, is identifying exactly who is using the product or service that you've developed to help alleviate the pain or make something more efficient, and then who is also ultimately going to pay for it. So there's classic examples within this realm, but generally you've got the user, the human being who's engaging with the product directly. And in many cases, you've got a payer who may or may not engage with the product, but is responsible for paying. And so the classic example I think many people will point to is Google. You know, we're all, many of us, I should say, not all, but are users of the product called Google, but it's actually advertisers that pay. And now there's a joke. Many people are saying, well, we're paying with our souls, or we're paying with our identity and our data. But the true business model is the advertiser that's paying. So when we're creating traction, we have to be building a solution that works for both sides of those market segments. So it can't just work for the user, it also has to work for the payer. Traction can be measured and kind of tracked via both of those engagements, right? So building a service on the front end, like the simplicity and the elegance of the Google search engine, obviously works for the user, the human being who's looking to speed things up in her or his life. But it also has to be an elegant and useful and productive experience for the payer, aka the advertiser. So both of those market segments have unique personas. And so we have to demonstrate traction with both. In the case of consumer products, we had one of my students recently was developing a new backyard game for the swimming pool, and that's a great example of providing a solution to both the user and the payer. That's the trick of traction, is really making sure that as you're measuring the excitement level and the willingness for these human beings to deviate from their status quo situation and many times open their wallet to pay for what you've developed as a solution, whether it's a product or a service or something else, that's when you know you've achieved product market fit. And that's when you know to probably start to scale up your operation. What's cool is he'd raised $50K on this. He finally did his crowdfunding campaign, and he texted me a few weeks ago. He's like, dude, we blew our goal out of the water. It's part of the pun. It was great. I mean, what was great about that is he understood how important it was to demonstrate that product market fit via crowdfunding before he went up to China or to wherever else to invest in the production of the game. That's the power of traction, right? If you don't have it, you're just hoping, right? You're basically saying, hey, if I build it, will they come? And your ego is saying, yes, of course they're going to come. But you have no tangible evidence to prove that out. In the parlance of lean startup methodology, all you're doing is making the process more efficient. You're deleting all of the ways that your ego can get in the way and steer you off track. Really what it requires is creativity. In order to run one of these experiments, these traction focused experiments, you have to be creative. Oftentimes you'll have to develop a version of the product that of course is not the working version or the finished version, but enough of the feature set of what you're trying to build, product or service or otherwise, that can just whet the palate of the target user and or payer. And if you nail the pain point, if you got the pain point right, and there's some aspect of your solution where the feature really is groundbreaking and resonates with the user and or payer, they will be in a position to validate your value proposition with a purchase order, with a letter of intent, with a pre-sale, or at the lower end of the spectrum, maybe just their email and say, hey, once this is ready, let me know. I'm going to be the first one to give you actual money for it. And that's kind of the classic example of Dropbox. And I was fortunate enough to actually be one of those early users of Dropbox, where I remember having a distinct problem that I myself, as both a would-be user and a payer, was wrestling with at the time. And when Dropbox showed me their experiment was a video, stick figure video showing how your files would live in this magical world called the cloud, I couldn't wait. I said, wow, if you can deliver me software that works the way you demonstrated with this stick figure video, I'm going to be the first one to pay whatever the cost is, because the painfulness was so acute. That is commonly referred to as the grandfather of the minimal viable product. So within the broad swath of practitioners of lean startup methodology dating back to the early 2010s, people commonly refer to Dropbox as being the ones who figured out what an MVP should look like and how it works. Because what's funny about that example is those guys could write code in their sleep, right? If they had enough ego and enough anecdotal evidence that they collected to say that, yes, if we write this code, if we build this software, yes, people will in fact want to use it and or pay for it. But in a stroke of brilliance, they basically said, well, let's take one additional step before we start writing the code. Let's produce this 5-minute stick figure video, put it out on the web and see what happens. So the brilliance of that was that instead of having to build the product and then trying to push it in the market, by releasing the video, they actually allowed the market to pull it into their own homes. And I was one of the people that pulled it out of their lab. I said, as soon as I saw that video, I said, I want it, so I pulled it, rather than the startup with very limited resources trying to push it to me, right? So that's the difference between a push and a pull marketing strategy.
If the data you're collecting is coming back and people aren't interested in using or paying for your solution, don't fall into fear of failure or get paralysis in analysis. Take action, pivot in the direction of the data, and learn from what you're finding. This can happen and will happen if you're doing the process right. It's okay. But the point here is not to work on something that nobody wants, right? If you want to support this video or me personally, leaving a like, commenting, subscribing, or sharing with a friend really means a lot. I want to say thank you to Elevate U for paying for the expenses involved in this video. They're really trying to raise the bar for learning content. They're an e-learning platform that uses AI to publish textbooks and other learning content for professors. If you're interested to learn more about that, or you're a professor that wants to get their content elevated, reach out to their contact page and I'll link it right here in the description below.